All right, hey everybody, this is Rosh, and you are watching Helix Basics. This is a YouTube tutorial series I'm putting together to help new and experienced users program their Line 6 Helix. So a little about myself. Once again, my name is Rosh, and I build and program guitar rigs out here in the LA area as well as online. Some of my clients include Steve Vai, Leppard, Melissa Etheridge, A Perfect Circle, Bush, Kylie Minogue, and more. And I wanted to give back to the Helix community and show some tips and tricks on how to program their Line 6 Helix. So if you've been watching this YouTube channel, you've noticed that I've definitely put up a lot of fractal audio content to program the FM3, the FM9, and the Axe 3. And one thing a lot of people don't know about me is I program all the modelers out there on the market, including the Kemper, the Quad Cortex, all the fractal, and in this case, the Line 6 Helix Floor. So I wanted to give back to the Helix community and show some tips and tricks on how to program the Helix. There's a lot of crossover between all the modelers, a lot of best practices that's going to give you the best guitar tone, both live, in the studio, at home, at rehearsal, and any other situation you find yourself in. So this video is going to be dealing with how to make a basic rock lead preset. And again, I'm going to be doing this completely on the front panel for this video, but the next video is going to have basically the same idea, but I'm going to be doing it in HX Edit. And this is for users who don't want to use a computer to program their Line 6 Helix. Instead, they just want to use the front panel. So right here, we're on a factory preset. Let's navigate to one of the user set lists so we don't overwrite any of the factory presets. So we're going to hit the preset button. We're going to use the joystick and navigate to one of the user set lists right here. And so in the user set list, it gives you access to all these blank presets that you can fill up with your own sounds. So I'm going to go to user set list 1 using the navigation joystick, or you can, of course, use the rotation of the joystick as well. And I'm going to press down. And right here, you can see I have a couple presets already in there. I'm going to navigate down to this new preset, and it's going to be completely blank. And I'm going to press the joystick. As you can see, it is completely blank in this preset. And of course, this tone is going to be very uninspiring. It's a basically direct guitar sound. So definitely not something that I would want to use as a rock lead sound. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to navigate the joystick to the center, and we're going to, whoops, not that. We're going to hit home again. We're going to press down on the joystick, and then now it's going to give us a list of all the blocks we can add. Using the joystick, you can either rotate or you can use the down function. And let's navigate to amp and cab. Now, Line 6 gives you the option to, of course, use an amp and a cabinet separately if you wish. And we're going to definitely cover that in the future. But in this case, we're going to do a simple rock lead preset using the amp+ cabinet. And what this does is Line 6 basically pairs a cabinet with whatever amplifier you choose, and this gives you it just makes it a little bit easier to dial in, because Line 6 has just kind of gone ahead of time and paired a cabinet with an amplifier. Now, of course, you can do something that you can't do in the real world, where you can pair an amplifier with a cabinet that would maybe not be paired usually with that amplifier. So you can do a 100-watt Marshall, pair it with a 1x12 cabinet. In the real world, it would blow up that cabinet, but in the digital modeling world, you can get a lot of tonal options out. But we're going to pick the amp and cabinet, and again, you can use the joystick to navigate to the right. It's going to give you the second column. Let's pick guitar, navigate to the right again. And we can use this to pick any of the amplifiers that we want. In this case, since we haven't done this in the tutorial series yet, let's go to one of the high gain or higher gain amps. And one of my favorite higher gain amps is the German Mahadiva, which is basically the Bogner Shiva. And the reason why I like this amp is it's pretty dark, and then it's great for lead stuff, because I like tones that are going to be similar to Eric Johnson or Andy Timmons or Greg Howe. Those kinds of players where the guitar tone is nice and thick and dark. It's not too grating on the ears. It's not too spiky. So that it, definitely cuts through the mix, but doesn't, irritate anybody's eardrums, including the guitar player. So let's pick the German Mahadiva. And in here, you're going to be presented with all the usual knobs of the amplifier. Now, using the page left and right, you're going to get to go into deeper parameters of the amplifier plus cabinet block. In this case, we want to page right until we get up to about the third page right there. And we are going to be presented with the cabinet. So with the cabinets, what you can do, of course, is you can rotate and pick different cabinets that you may want to pair with the amplifier. In this case, Line 6 has paired the Uber V30 cabinet with this amplifier, which is, basically the Bogner cabinet. with V30 speakers in there. And then, of course, it's giving you a microphone that they've chosen. And again, rotating any of these knobs is going to give you, allow you to select what microphone. And in this case, it was selecting the 47 FET, I believe. And so let's work with the cabinet block first. Whenever I'm dialing in tones, it is my firm belief that the cabinet block is going to shape your tone the most. So let's start off with some basic low and high cuts. For most users, I recommend starting somewhere between 80 and 100 for the low cut. So we'll just start with 80 there. And then the high cut is going to be somewhere between 5 and 8K. Now, the low cut basically cuts the low end of the amplifier, and there's a lot of information below 80 hertz that you just don't need as a guitar player. It's going to conflict with the bass player. It's going to conflict with the bass drum, all the low end. It makes your tone really muddy. And if you're using a full range flat response speaker, it can make it really boomy. And that's definitely something you don't want. You want to feel your palm mutes. You want to feel the guitar, but you don't want to have too much of it. So here is what it would sound like without a low cut. Now, if we bring the low cut to about 80, it's just going to clean up that low end a little bit. Now, the high cut is going to be the low cut kind of in reverse. And again, there's all this information up at the top end of the guitar that, again, doesn't need to be there. It'll conflict with the vocals, conflict with the cymbals, conflict with instruments that are higher in the frequency spectrum. And again, it just makes that tone, guitar tone of yours really spiky and gets it really grating on the ears. And you'll notice that even going from basically 20K all the way down to about 10K, you're not going to notice that much of a tonal difference even if I start high cutting from there. As you can hear, it's not really doing much, but now when we get to around the 9 or 10 or 9K, you're going to notice that definitely the tone starts getting a little different, and the tone's going to get darker the more we lower the high cut. So obviously all the way down to 2K is going to be just too dark. So again, I recommend most users go somewhere between 5 and 8K depending on the type of guitar tone they're going to do. So let's start with 8. I think that's pretty good already right there. And now we can focus on the position and the distance. So the position of the microphone is going to be basically how close to the center of the speaker versus how far away from the center of the speaker. The closer you get to the center of the speaker, the brighter the tone is going to be. So that is the center. That's the brightest tone you're going to get. And then when you move all the way out to the edge of the speaker, it's going to be the darkest tone you get. So usually finding somewhere where it's close to the center but not quite there is going to be a good starting point. I definitely recommend that most users start at the cap edge, and then they either move towards the center if they need the tone to be brighter, or move away from the center if they need the tone to be darker. So let's start at the cap edge. All right, so I feel like we could go a little darker. Yeah, somewhere around there. And the distance is going to determine how much of the proximity effect you're going to get. So the distance is how close the microphone is pointing directly at the speaker. So again, if you move the distance further away, it's going to reduce the proximity effect. It basically shifts the tone a little bit, but it also reduces a lot of the bass. So here it is at the closest distance. And then here it is all the way at the further end. And again, we're going for a lead sound with this one, so I definitely like it right up against the grill cloth there, as close as it'll go. And the microphones are also going to change your tone. So this is a condenser FET mic, and that's just what Line 6 defaulted to. So the dynamic mics are going to give you much more of that mid-range punch. It's going to cut through the mix a lot more, but it's going to have a lot less top end and bottom end. And as you can hear, if we go to the ribbons are going to be the darkest mics. They have a lot of low end, but a very smooth top end, but they're really dark. And of course, the condenser mics are going to be the kind of mics that give you a little bit of the of everything. They give you a little bit of the top, a little bit of the mids, and a little bit of the bottom. They're the most probably even sounding mics that they have here in the Helix. So I did like this 47 condenser FET. It was a pretty good. To me, that has enough, mid-range and top end to not be too dark, but it doesn't get too bright there. So it's kind of got that, sweet spot right in the middle. All right, so let's page back to the main page here. And then this is now where I would actually start turning the knobs on the amp. And as you can see, these are the default settings for this particular amp. Now, one of the things about the Bogner Shiva or the German Mahadiva amp here is that don't be afraid to crank the treble up. It's a pretty dark amp. Definitely dial it in with your eyes rather than your ears. So as you can see, the treble's at 7.6 as at the default, and it's not even that bright. So you can go all the way up. And it doesn't really get to some ear-splitting kind of treble. So I'm actually going to bring it back to that 7.2 or whatever that was. Yeah, I think that sounds pretty good. And then let's add a little bit more bass. Yeah, I kind of like it there. Let's add a little bit of drive. And again, I'm playing a Les Paul, so this sounds pretty good to me. And again, we're going for a lead sound. So what's going to happen with a lead sound is I'm going to boost a already distorted amp with a overdrive pedal, and it's going to basically give it a little bit more sustain. It's going to make the notes easier to play, and it's going to shave off a little bit of the top end and the bottom end. So the next step that we're going to do is let's just add a reverb here. So I'm going to use the joystick, press down, and I'm going to add a reverb, and let's pick a mono reverb, and let's bring in the hall again. And again, I'm going to just bring the decay back to about maybe 1 second. And let's bring the mix down to about maybe here. Be a little more. Okay, that sounds great. And then let's get an overdrive pedal in here. So I'm going to go right in front of the amp, use the joystick, and then let's bring in a distortion right there using the joystick. Go to the right, we're going to go to a mono. And for me, whenever I make a lead sound, I tend to default mainly to the Tube Screamer style pedal. So for example, this Scream 808 is going to be that Tube Screamer style pedal, and I'm going to put that in there. And now the tip that I usually give is that I don't get any distortion from the pedal. I mainly use it to boost the input. So I'm going to crank the level to 10. You can crank the gain down to 0. And I'm going to add a little bit more gain if I need a little bit more sustain or whatever. And it just depends on like what you're going to do. So here is the level at 10, the gain all the way at 0. Okay, so as you can hear, what's going to happen is by using this, this Tube Screamer, Scream 808, it chops off a lot of the bottom end and a lot of the top end. So here it is without it. So you see it just pulls off a little bit of that bottom end, but it also pulls off the top end. But by boosting the level, it gives you a lot more sustain. Versus without. So as you can hear, it just kind of rounds out the tone a little bit better. And in my opinion, that's going to be super useful for when you're playing, again, a lead sound. So I wouldn't really use this type of tone for a rhythm sound. It's a little too dark. It's not going to cut through. And of course, it's not going to really respond to the volume knob as well as I'd like for most kind of rock rhythm sounds. I mean, here's my volume all the way at like 1. And it's still too dirty for what I would want. I would want somewhere around like a crunchy sound at like the volume with like 3 or 4, but because we're using a distortion pedal and an amp that's already distorted, it just has way too much gain. Now, if you find that you need a little bit more gain, by all means, you can add a little bit in. I find that I don't need that, so I'm going to just keep that at 0. All right. And last but not least, what we're going to do is, of course, let's add a delay. And we're going to go to a blank spot. And again, let's go down to the delay. And this time I'm going to pick a stereo delay. And let's talk about kind of what happens when you use a stereo delay. So this might actually be relevant. So if you take a delay like this, that's a ping pong delay, you'll notice that right away it's not really pinging or ponging because, for example, this reverb right here is actually summing it to mono because, again, if we go in here, we used a mono reverb right there. So one of the things that you definitely want to do is look at your signal path and make sure that nothing, if you're trying to use something that's stereo, for example, like that delay, nothing after it is in mono. So what we may want to do is actually change this dynamic hall to a stereo delay. So let's use the dynamic hall. Now it's stereo. Let's go back to the same settings that we had. Bring back the mix, and then let's go to this. And then now you're going to notice that this this delay is now doing a ping pong style effect, and you can hear it panning from left to right. So keep in mind that whatever you put into the preset, you want to make sure that there's nothing being summed to mono. So by making this reverb a stereo reverb instead of a mono reverb, we now have a stereo effect with the ping pong delay. Now, this isn't really the type of delay that I would use for a lead sound. I would definitely use something more like the dual delay. So let's pick this. And the dual delay is pretty cool because it allows you to select what's going to be on the left side and what's going to be on the right side. And you can change the time and the feedback for both sides. So I like this delay. And what you're going to hear is that the left side has a faster delay. This is basically like eighth notes on this side. And then on the right side, it's going to be quarter notes. And what you can do is you can tailor each, it's basically like having two delays right next to each other, and you can tailor each side to it. Now for me, that's a lot of delay, so we can definitely bring the mix down. So let's bring the mix down to maybe about 20. And for me, I'm kind of going for like an Andy Timmons, Eric Johnson type of delay. So the next thing we want to do is, of course, page right. And then now you are also presented with low and high cuts for the delay itself. So you can actually EQ how much of the top end and bottom end of the delays are. So because this delay is basically like almost like a digital delay, it has a very pronounced top end to it. So what I want to do is, and this is a pretty old school trick, is that I want to start high cutting and low cutting the delay so that it's going to sit in the mix a little bit better. So I'll bring these low and high cuts here. Yeah, I'll bring this down even more. And then now that the delay isn't so conflicting, I can actually bring the mix up a little bit on both of these. Maybe not that much. Let's leave them down around the 20s. Yeah, I'm definitely digging that. And again, you can adjust how much repeats you want. I find this is probably about as many repeats as I would like. And then, of course, the mod mode gives you different ways that the note is going to, each decay repeat is going to be. So the chorusing basically makes it kind of like out of tune a little bit, giving it more of a chorus effect, and then the vibrato You can hear that it's also going to get a little bit even further out of tune. The chorusing seems fine for me. And again, you can keep low cutting and high cutting here just to make it sit in the mix a little bit better. Kind of plays itself. And last thing we're going to do is I want to keep the trails on. And basically what happens with this is if you bypass the delay, the trails will still repeat. So you can hear that the repeats are still there when I bypass. If I keep the trails off, for example, and I bypass the block, it'll have no trails. So I like to keep the trails on. And again, that's just if I was bypassing the delay. So outside of that, I think we got a pretty good effect. Now, the other thing is you can adjust the depth of how warbly each repeat is going to be. So if I crank the depth a lot, so it's going to be a much deeper, and actually kind of digging that right now. So you can hear it's actually going to be chorusing even more than the dry tone that you're using. So I'm pretty much digging that. So let's save this. And then now what we can do is, now that we're saving this, we can of course change this to whatever we would like. I'm just going to call this Rosh lead. And again, I'm using the joystick to navigate between each letter. And you can of course rotate the knob as well. So let's do Rosh. And then I will just, in the interest of time, go here. Go to Rosh lead. And go here. And then these, we can just delete and delete. And then now we can save. Oops, save, and then hit save. Now this is going to be called Rosh lead. So right here, we got a pretty, again, generic rock lead, but I think this is going to be pretty useful for a lot of people. Yeah, kind of plays itself. Pretty fun to play. And again, we're using the German Mahadiva amp. We're boosting it with a tube screamer. And of course, you can definitely place these effects as you want. Something like this, I would probably put in a snapshot. So I would have like a clean, a crunch, a rhythm, and a lead sound. But we will cover that in a future video. So without further ado, that's going to be it for this video. Thanks for watching. If you guys need any one-on-one help, by all means, feel free to reach out, and we can definitely dial in your Helix products. And thanks for watching.
I'm falling with you. I'm standing with you.